Chris Doering played wide receiver at Florida. He joined Florida as a walk-on and redshirted, and in 91 received an athletic scholarship to play from 1992 through 1995. He not only earned his scholarship, but even set records, catching 149 passes for 2,107 yards and 31 touchdowns, which is a Gator record and second best in the SEC behind Alabama's Devontae Smith. Chris Doering joins me on this edition of the Stingray Show to talk about his Florida Gator career under Steve Spurrier.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
And with that, I want to welcome you inside another edition of the Stingray Show. My guest that I'm about to bring on this evening is a three-time SEC champion, 93, 94, and in 95. And during his time in the NFL, he linked up with Coach Spurrier again when Coach Spurrier went to the Washington Redskins and played at Washington. Please help me welcome to the Stingray Show former Florida Gator legend and SEC Network analyst, Mr. Chris Doering. Chris, how are things with you? And go Gators.
That's right. Go Gators, man. Stingray, it's good to be back with you. I'm doing well. Busy off season, just on the heels of SEC Media Days, kind of that unofficial start to the countdown of the season. And so trying to squeeze every little bit of fun I can get in before the grind starts here in the next couple of weeks.
Chris, briefly, what were some of your biggest takeaways a couple of weeks ago in Atlanta at SEC Media Days?
I think all the talk was about the quarterback position. A lot of young guys last year that got their feet wet that come back for another year. Some highly recruited guys now get the chance to start, like we'll see in Texas and Alabama. Some guys returning from injury. It was good to see Blake Shapen out there again after he went down with that injury last season. So I think quarterback obviously is the most important position in all of sports, and there's quite a few guys that we feel really good about heading into the season. So I think this could be another year where the league is really talented from top to bottom. It's going to be highly competitive. I'm worried about the cannibalism that existed last year. I think that's probably something we'll deal with again. But I do think this year, if we get another one of those 9-3 teams, I think they probably find themselves on the inside of the college football playoff field instead of outside like Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina did last year.
Now, you are a native of Gainsville, Florida. Growing up, who were some of your idols that you wanted to mold your game like as a wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to give you a little bit more history, I grew up here in Gainesville, the son of two Florida graduates. My father was a professor in the College of Pharmacy. So everything that we did here revolved around not just Gator football, Gator athletics. We'd be at Florida football, baseball, basketball, gymnastics. Everything we did revolved around the University of Florida. So these athletes were superheroes to me, larger than life in a lot of ways. And I gravitated to Chris Collinsworth. He was probably my all-time idol, not only as a player at Florida, but on to the Bengals and then in the broadcasting world. I think he's one of the best in all of the broadcasting field. So really appreciate kind of what he's modeled for my life. But just in general, man, Kerwin Bell back in the day, Ricky Nattiel, I mean, so many great players, Neil Anderson. There's all these guys that were, impactful in my life when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and they were, starting to dominate in the mid-'80s. And then I get a chance to grow up and go to these events where, I'm amongst these guys, and I'm still kind of in awe of guys that were my childhood heroes. So it's really a cool experience and something that 10-year-old Chris Doering would be pretty impressed with.
So, Chris, talk about your recruitment as a high school athlete and coming out of high school, why you decided to walk on at Florida.
That's a quick discussion. I had no scholarship offers. There was really no option, which to me was the best thing that could have happened in hindsight. I grew up, as I said, very passionate Florida fan, always dreamt of getting a chance to run out of that tunnel and wear the Florida uniform. I was a little disenchanted when I didn't get a scholarship offer from them. I did get a preferred walk-on offer, which I also did from Florida State, and briefly kind of entertained that idea. But had I been given a scholarship to another school, Wake Forest or somewhere else, I probably would have taken it. But because I didn't have any options, I followed my heart. And I think that passion and being rooted in the history of the University of Florida pushed me harder to attain the dreams and the goals that I had for myself, kept me from ever giving up, and really made me much more grateful for what I ultimately got a chance to do because of the history of me growing up in that stadium.
If you would talk about how different and difficult it is as a player being a walk-on versus a scholarship athlete.
Yes, Stingray. I mentioned being a preferred walk-on, which, was a little bit better than having to go out and go through the walk-on tryouts. I was guaranteed a spot. I was supposedly treated like all the scholarship guys. But forever, that walk-on label was something that I viewed as kind of a scarlet letter. I always felt like I was inferior to everybody else. But I will say Coach Spurrier treated everybody the same. Coach Spurrier gave everybody an opportunity. I don't think there's a lot of places that I could have gone that I would have gotten that chance. And I'm very grateful for Coach Spurrier in terms of what he did and giving me that opportunity, but also teaching me and taking time between he and Dwayne Dixon, our receiver coach, to coach me the same way as everybody else. We had 3 scholarship receivers that were signed in that 91 class, and then me as a walk-on. And I was afforded every opportunity just like those guys were. So at the end of the day, getting a chance to prove that I belong, getting a chance that I proved that I deserved that scholarship really meant a lot to me. And I think there's a lot of guys that are given scholarships coming out of high school based upon what they did at that level. But I was given a scholarship based on earning it through my first 2 years at the University of Florida. And when I was given that scholarship, when Coach Spurrier announced it right before my sophomore season, after our 2-a-day practice in the morning, seeing the reaction of all my teammates, watching how happy they were for me. They were happier for me than I was because they knew how much it meant to me. They knew how hard I had worked for it. It really was a validating feeling, and one that, I never really was ever going to let up because I knew what it took to get there, and there was no way I was going to become complacent. It was all about pushing to that next goal that I had.
Chris Doering, the former Florida Gator wide receiver, is my guest this evening. And Chris, if you would, what do you remember most about meeting Coach Steve Spurier for the very first time?
Yeah, I grew up a Gator fan, and my parents were there in the late 60s. So all I had ever heard about, there was no history of national championships or SEC championships. The real only focal point was that Florida had a Heisman Trophy winner back in 1966. And so, I heard the stories from my parents about Coach Spurrier. I obviously watched him when he was with the Tampa Bay Bandits in the USFL. But when he was, rumored to be the head coach and then ultimately announced as the head coach, you felt like this prodigal son was coming home and to rescue his alma mater, and the plan that he laid out for what it was going to take to get Florida to that promised land, beating Georgia, winning SEC championships that were counted, winning a national championship that all seemed much more attainable because of how confident he was. Immediately tore up the AstroTurf in Florida Field, put down grass in there, went from the orange uniforms to the blue uniforms that he used to wear when he was a player. So I think he had a clear vision for what the path was to get Florida to where everybody wanted to get. But when I first met him, I actually met him the summer before my senior year. I went to the Florida football camp throughout my childhood, and that first one that he held, I guess in the summer of 1990, 1990. I had a great camp there. He knew who I was. I think that helped me ultimately earn that preferred walk-on spot. But just remember feeling this larger than life, in awe kind of emotion for getting to see, the most celebrated player and now most anticipated coach in the history of the program.
So, Chris, your first season at Florida, they redshirted you and you didn't play. But the Gators took a trip to Syracuse to take on the Orange up there in the Dome. Were you able to make that trip with the team? And if so, talk about that experience of being on the road at number 18 Syracuse.
Yeah, I didn't make that trip. The red shirts did not travel. It was a weird year. You know, you're trying to acclimate to college life. You're trying to acclimate to college courses. You don't have the oversight of being in your home with your parents, trying to figure out, you know, a schedule that I think in hindsight, like people don't get redshirted now, but it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I think it's the best developmental thing, both in terms of player development and personal development. So I'm grateful that I had that opportunity to just kind of learn and work on the scout team, get in the weight room, put on some size and some speed. But I remember that game very well. And there's a lot of folks that don't recall that in the early years of Coach Spurrier's tenure, we had trouble going on the road and winning. And that was one that, you know, that environment was pretty crazy. I remember watching on TV and hearing some of my teammates when they came back talk about that. We struggled so much on the road that our nickname from a lot of people is roadkill, because we just could not find a way to win. And that was part of one of the early hurdles that we had to overcome to start, you know, getting on that track and that trajectory to winning an SEC championship in '93.
Now, let's go ahead and talk about your first game action, which came in '92. What do you remember most about your first game in a Florida uniform, and who was it against?
Yeah, I'll say there was a gradual progression in my career. I walked on that '91 season and got redshirted. '92, I made the travel squad as one of the top 8 receivers on the team. Didn't get a chance to play much, but early in the season we went to Tennessee, and the Vols in the driving range just blew us out. Schuler was fantastic that day. So I actually got a chance to get in the ball game late. Antoine Childs, who was another member of the class that I came in with, was our third string quarterback. Really strong arm, a lot of revs on it when it came out of his arm. And Coach Spurrier called a curl route to me. The ball went right through my hands because of how wet it was and bounced off my shoulder pad, went up in the air, came back in my hands, and I caught it. So I think my statistics that year were 1 catch for 13 yards. But I felt really accomplished having an opportunity to do that and to get my name in the record books for that season.
Later that season, you got to experience your first world's largest outdoor cocktail party versus Georgia, in which Florida won 26-24. Talk about that experience of the '92 world's largest outdoor cocktail party against Georgia.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to play in that ball game, but I was on the sideline dressed, and it was a highly anticipated matchup with a Georgia team that had a Heisman favorite in Garrison Hurst. Our defense had a great plan that day, and you know, really shut Garrison Hurst down to the point that after the game they were all doing the Heisman pose and falling down, kind of mocking Georgia and their running back. But you know, that series, being, you know, dressed out for it, it just made me more hungry. That was the game I grew up with as a kid, as the one that meant the most to me. Georgia dominated us during the '80s, so it was something that I loved getting a chance to see the front row view of, but couldn't wait to get a chance to actually play in it in the coming years.
Now, Chris, let's go ahead and talk about what you are known for there in Florida history. The following season in '93, you are known for what is coined the catch, which was the game-winning touchdown versus Kentucky to win 24-20 there in Lexington. Talk about that game leading up to that play and then the catch itself.
Yeah, let me kind of set up that season a little bit. That was my heading into my redshirt sophomore season in '93. As I talked about earlier, I was awarded a scholarship that summer during 2-a-day practices, and so I went from being a walk-on to on scholarship to playing in the first game of the season and catching 4 passes in the opener that year in the Swamp. And then week 2, we go to Lexington. It was actually September 11th, 1993. And Coach Spurrier tells me before the game that I'm going to start. So here I am. You know, just a couple weeks ago, it was a walk-on. Now I'm starting in an SEC game for my beloved Florida Gators, and just felt like everything was falling into place. Early in the fourth quarter, I catch my first career touchdown reception, and I think that this is the pinnacle of everything I ever dreamt of. And little did I know I'd have a chance to come back and catch the game winner with 3 seconds left in that ball game. I mean, we didn't play very well. We threw 7 interceptions, but somehow found a way to put ourselves in a position to win that game at the end. And so that was the hurdle. That was kind of the turning point. And Coach Spurrier talks about that a lot, figuring out a way to win on the road, figuring out a way to overcome self-inflicted wounds. That catch kind of changed my life and the way that people viewed me. Going to campus on that following Monday was totally different than having gone to class the previous Friday. So it was really a kind of a whirlwind experience, but it was awesome and really felt like I was living out every childhood goal that I've ever had for myself.
Later that season, Florida went back to Birmingham for the SEC championship game, but this time you guys beat Alabama. Talk about winning your first SEC championship there in '93.
Yeah, I think for those that weren't around or don't remember, there was no such thing as the SEC championship game until '92, and then Roy Kramer, the commissioner at the time, came up with this unique idea that even when we were getting ready to play in it at '92, it just seemed very weird. We're playing in Birmingham at Legion Field, a second home for Alabama in this title game, so that felt a little off. And that was the year Antonio Langham picked off the pass late in the game to win it for the Tide, to keep them undefeated and on course to the national title. But we got a chance the next year to come back and kind of right the wrongs. We did that in their own backyard, and it really was kind of cool to get a chance to do that at Legion Field, especially since the next year we were moving to the Georgia Dome to have it kind of take on that next level of Super Bowl type feel there in Atlanta.
And Chris, talk about some of your fondest memories of winning your first SEC championship.
It was an interesting year for me. It started so fast. I had that catch against Kentucky. A couple games later, I had 12 catches for 199 yards and 3 touchdowns against Mississippi State. But as the season wore on, I kind of got phased out a little bit. And so it was frustrating. I did play some in that ball game, but it wasn't as much as I would have liked. My contributions weren't as great as I had hoped. But it was really awesome as a lifelong Gator fan to win that SEC championship and to know that I had a ring on the way. I'd gotten a ring in '91 when we won it, but this one was really special because of the SEC championship, particularly the game being played in Birmingham there at Legion Field.
Now, let's move to the '94 season, and you were a part of something that is no longer possible today. The final game of the '94 regular season, Florida tied 31-31 with Florida State in Tallahassee. Please describe as a player what it is like to tie at the end of a game rather than go into overtime.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think if you asked me and then asked Danny Cannell or another Florida State guy, they would describe a tie very differently. We were up 31-3 with about 12 minutes left in that ball game. It was being played there in Tallahassee, and we completely cleared out the stadium of all the Seminole fans. We got a little conservative on offense. The defense, wasn't getting stops anymore. And all of a sudden, the momentum completely changed. Fans started coming back into the stadium from Florida State. We couldn't do anything right after dominating, 3+ quarters of that ball game. So it just felt like sand was slipping through our fingers. And at the end of the ball game, Florida State scores. I'm not sure why Coach Bowden didn't go for 2. I don't think we had any chance of stopping them. But we did end in a 31-31 tie, as you said, something that's not possible anymore with overtime. But we did get a chance to play them again in the Sugar Bowl. They called it the fifth quarter and the French Quarter. It did not go our way there. And so all the things that we were accomplishing, during my time at Florida State, including national championship, SEC championships, beating Georgia, everything else, we could not quite get over that Florida State hurdle. And that was really frustrating, particularly because they're our arch rival and had the foot on the throat and letting them up just further accentuated that frustration.
You were also a part of another huge change in the SEC. You briefly talked about it. The SEC championship game moved from Legion Field over to the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. Talk about how different that was playing your first SEC championship there in Birmingham, and then the next year it moving to Atlanta.
Yeah, the first 2 years we played there at Legion Field, as I said, kind of a second home for the Tide. And then finally we moved to a true neutral site game in the Georgia Dome, which was a state-of-the-art facility at the time. It took on this feeling of kind of being a part of a Super Bowl. Really, everybody kind of figured out, what it meant to play in this ball game. And I just remember running out of that locker room and the excitement that I had, kind of the split crowd between the Tide and Gator fans. It was an absolute war. I mean, that was a really talented Alabama team coached by Coach Stallings. They were undefeated at that time. It just really felt like a heavyweight fight with each of us taking big punch after big punch at each other.
Now, the first 4 years of your time at Florida, 91 to 94, every single year, Florida ended up playing in New Orleans in the Sugar Bowl. How old did that get of going to 4 straight years of the same bowl game there in New Orleans?
Well, 92, we actually went to the Gator Bowl that year because Alabama won the SEC championship game. So they went to the Sugar Bowl that season to play Miami. But every other year we did go to the Sugar Bowl, which was the goal of every SEC team. You win the SEC championship, you go to the Sugar Bowl. So it was a great experience. I think the Sugar Bowl is the best bowl around. Everybody knows where to gather there in the French Quarter. Such history around that bowl game. So it was a real honor to get a chance to participate in as many Sugar Bowls as I did. And I think, we appreciated it even more after, I'm sure we'll get to it, talking about the 95 national championship game in Arizona. But contrasting what it was like to play out there in the Phoenix area versus playing in New Orleans, where everything was so centrally located, was quite a difference.
Chris, your senior season in 95, you finally got a win versus your arch rival Florida State there in Gainesville. Talk about ending your college career at home on senior day by beating Florida State.
Yeah, we were undefeated at that point, trying to stay in the hunt for the national championship. The Florida State team that we had tied the year before and then lost in the bowl game, hadn't done very well against the Seminoles. And not to mention, this was senior day, my last game as a Gator. And I remember, driving on the bus from our hotel, through Gainesville to campus, just being in tears, realizing it was my last opportunity to do that. We celebrate the seniors with our parents out there on the field and getting to be introduced in front of the home crowd. Then all of a sudden, you got to shift your mindset to, hey, we got a big ball game here against an arch rival. So that was a little challenging. And then late in the first half, I caught a touchdown that broke the SEC career in single season touchdown reception. So it really was kind of a storybook ending in my last game as a Gator, to beat Florida State finally, to set the record there at home in my last game, and to keep the hopes of playing in the national championship alive was really special.
And touch on, if you will, playing in the national championship game in Tempe, Arizona, your final game as a Florida Gator taking on number 1 Nebraska.
Yeah, Florida had not had a chance to play for a national championship prior to that. We remained undefeated and won the SEC championship game. We're the only team still to this day in the history of Florida football that did that went undefeated in the regular season and won the SEC title game. So I felt like we had accomplished a lot, but I mentioned storybook endings. Losing to Nebraska in that game was not the way that it was supposed to end. It wasn't the way it was supposed to end for our season. It wasn't the way it was supposed to end for my career. I did have a pretty good game personally. I had 8 for 125, including 4 catches on the first drive, which was awesome. But we didn't score a touchdown on the first drive. We settled for a field goal, which was a little out of character for us. That was the dawn of the zone blitz in college football. Nebraska coaches had been meeting with Monty Kiffin, who was now with the Bucks, and figured out this zone blitz scheme that kind of confused our protections and what Danny was seeing. So we were not prepared for that. The game kind of snowballed. We were up 10-6 after the first quarter. Then Jaquez Green gets hurt on a kickoff return where he dislocates his hip, and we're standing there watching him kind of writhe in pain on the field for about 30 minutes. Really, a lot of a confluence of things just happened, and the game got away from us. I think that Nebraska team is one of the best in the history of college football. I don't think they were 40 points better than us, but the things that we learned that year really, I think, served the team the next year when they got a chance to go back and play in a national title game. They were more prepared for that. But that was kind of the theme of my time at Florida. You know, first year we go to the Sugar Bowl in '91, we get blown out by Nebraska, by Notre Dame and Jerome Bettis. We didn't really handle the French Quarter or being in New Orleans very well. The next time we went back there in '93, it was business, strictly business. We beat West Virginia, an undefeated Mountaineers team, 41-7. Really started to understand that better. The first year we lose in the SEC title game. The next year we come back and know how to handle that better and win consecutive SEC championship games in '93, '94, '95, and then '96. So I think it was all about learning lessons from disappointments. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be part of that team in '96 that was able to right the wrong. But it was a game that I'm honored to play in, but still haunts me to this day. I think there's two things about my career that really I have a hard time getting over. One was the choke at Doak, the 31-31 tie that we talked about earlier, and then the loss against Nebraska in the national championship
Now,
game.
after your time at Florida, you played for 8 seasons in the NFL with multiple teams. Looking back, for you, what was the biggest transition of going from a college athlete to a pro in the NFL?
You know, I honestly think the jump from high school to playing in the SEC was a greater one than from the SEC to the NFL. I mean, a lot of guys that I played with at the NFL level were guys I played against when I was at Florida. It's obviously very competitive. You know, over a 10-year period in the NFL, I was cut 10 different times. I moved 22 different times across the country. So it was very unsettled, one that really produced a lot of anxiety. In fact, you know, this time of year still kind of gets me going, you know, thinking about reporting to training camp. I have dreams that I'm not prepared or I'm late getting there. And so it was always just something that I was one of the last ones to get cut or one of the last ones to make the team. So proving myself, you know, luckily for me, I had that experience of having to do that at Florida, having to earn the scholarship. So I was prepared to do it. But I think it's really helped me in my post-playing days as well, understand, you know, what it takes to be successful, how you have to believe in yourself and keep pushing despite disappointment. You know, my NFL career was not nearly as statistically successful as what I would have liked, but I did get a chance to play with a ton of great players, had a chance to live in some great cities, play for some great coaches, and in some schemes that have really helped me in my broadcasting career as well.
Now, oddly enough, in 2002, you were able to link up with your college coach, Steve Spurier, while he was the coach there at Washington. Was there any difference of playing with Coach Spurrier in college versus when he got to the NFL?
It was an honor to play with Coach Spurrier, both at Florida and then to have that chance at Washington. And in fact, it was very timely for me because after my second year in Denver in 2000, I tore my Achilles tendon early in that season and was out for the rest of the year. Tried to come back in 2001, just wasn't quite healthy and didn't make the team that year. So I didn't have a whole lot of options heading into the 2002 season. I actually signed with an arena football team with the idea that I was going to have to go play that and prove myself again. Luckily, Coach Spurrier was going to the NFL. I was like one of the few Gators that was happy that he was leaving Florida because I knew it meant I'd get another opportunity. I was one of the first guys that he brought in there, and I was able to help kind of teach the scheme to everybody else. I mean, we had a ton of Gators on that team, Danny and Shane and Riedel and Jaquez and ultimately Willie Jackson. So there's a bunch of familiar faces both on the team and the coaching staff. But it really revitalized my career after that injury and statistically one of my best seasons in the NFL. But was really grateful that Coach Spurrier, again, gave me an opportunity when nobody else was really willing to.
What are some of your other fondest memories of playing your 8 seasons in the NFL?
I think the biggest thing is just all the friendships that I developed and having a chance to do something at the highest level. You know, most teams kept 5 wide receivers. So you're talking about 32 teams with 5 receivers, 160 people in the whole world get a chance to do that. And every year I was fighting a next wave of guys that were coming in trying to take my job. And so to be able to have sustained my career for as long as I did, even though it wasn't statistically as successful, is something I'm really proud about. Getting to travel the country and live in a bunch of great places. Got a chance to play preseason games in Osaka, Japan, and Sydney, Australia, which was a great experience. So just really, really thankful for that opportunity. And again, the lessons that, served me well in the rest of my life that I learned during that 10-year period were very beneficial. But to think, that I was a walk-on from right here in Gainesville and ended up getting to do something at the highest level, like playing in the NFL, where the average career is like 3.4 years, getting to do it for as long as I did, I felt like I was stealing. So it was awesome. It's a blessing and a curse getting to do what I did, living out my dreams as a kid of playing at Florida and to play in the NFL. Not many people get to do that, but at the same time, it was something that done it and it was over with by the time I was 32 years old. So a lot of life left that you're trying to figure out what can drive you and give you that same sort of passion that you had for playing football.
Chris, I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you. Who was the biggest trash talker that you ever played against in college at Florida and then in the NFL?
Ooh, man, I don't know, man. I had a chance to play in Washington with some really good corners. Every day I went up against Darrell Green, Champ Bailey, and Fred Smoot. Fred Smoot's a great trash talker and one that was kind of fun to go up against. But playing against those three guys every single day and then going out on Sundays, it was like so much easier because of what you went through in practice. But yeah, I'd say I was probably a pretty good trash talker as well, particularly in college. Enjoyed getting into it with the guys a little bit, but it's part of the fun of being out there, part of the fun of the competition. And you're talking about guys with huge egos that are all going up against each other to try to prove who's the better of the bunch. So I miss you don't get a chance to kind of have that competition and trash talk in real life, unfortunately.
The loudest stadium that you ever played in college and then in the NFL?
In college, I'd say, Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn. That was probably my favorite stadium to play in. We didn't have a ton of success against Auburn either. We lost there in 93 on a late field goal, and then 94 they came to our place, and Frank Sanders caught that touchdown in the end zone late in the ballgame to beat us. So we went back there my senior year. Coming in, they're rocking the bus. It's a loud stadium. 93, we're actually up 10-0. Getting ready to go in to make it 17-0, and Danny kind of read the signal from Coach Spurier wrong. He was supposed to hit me on a backside slant, and instead he threw it to the front side, and it got picked off for a 100-yard interception return for a touchdown that changed the dynamic of that ball game. I just remember chasing the DB down, trying to catch him, and looking up in the stands and seeing the place going crazy. It looked like it was vibrating. So that's probably my favorite and most loud stadium that I played in, although there's a ton of them in the SEC. And then at the NFL level, I'd say playing against the Chiefs at Arrowhead, that's a very college-like atmosphere, very passionate fans that are loud at the right times. So that was an awesome experience, getting a chance to play there, particularly as a Steeler, going there and playing against the Chiefs with that sort of passion, those two fan bases being as passionate as they were.
Which defender gave you the most fits in college? Like, man, I just can't shake this guy.
I would say Torrey James. Torrey played at LSU, particularly my senior year, where they tried to be more physical with us at the line of scrimmage, played more press coverage to try to disrupt the timing of our passing game. Torrey was as big as I was, 6'4", long arms. Those are the guys that I kind of struggled with the most. Ironically, I had a chance to play with him again in the NFL in Denver for a couple of years. We became really good friends, and in practice, he gave me as equally a hard time. So that was one guy that kind of stood out throughout my career that I struggled with a little bit more.
3 questions left because I know you're on a time crunch. The first one, you played in 40 games at Florida. Which game that you played in meant the most to you and why?
Yeah, it's a tough question. The Kentucky catch changed my life in '93. Going 5-0 against Georgia in my 5 years there really meant a lot to me, particularly because of the history of Georgia struggling, or Georgia dominating Florida struggling to win in the 80s. That was a big one there, particularly because I got a chance to do it both in Jacksonville, in Gainesville, and in Athens, with the stadium being under renovation there in Jacksonville in 94, 95. I probably would say my senior year, that final game against Florida State, staying undefeated, beating the Seminoles without having a ton of success, breaking the record there. It just felt like everything kind of came together the right way that day.
You are right there in Gainesville. Give us the pulse of the Florida Gators as we go into the 25 season, please.
I think there's a lot of optimism, man. This is a team that finished the season really strong last year, a remarkable turnaround after a terrible start. A lot of hope with DJ Lagway coming back and being healthy and what he was able to do as a freshman. A lot of players that have come to Gainesville want to be a part of the DJ Lagway kind of experience. So I think they've done a good job in building talent around him. The offensive and defensive lines look more like the Alabamas and Georgias and of this league. So I feel really positive about the direction of the program. They've got to start fast, though. The schedule's a little different this year. They struggled, the last couple of years in openers against Utah and last year against Miami. This year they start against LIU and play USF before going to Baton Rouge to play LSU. So they got a ramp-up period. But I want to see them come into the season a little more prepared, playing with a greater sense of urgency and see if they can keep that momentum from the end of the 2024 season
and
going.
Chris, you played with Coach Steve Spurier. I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. What is your favorite Coach Steve Spurier story that you could share with us that gets a lot of laughs to finish this up?
I think all of us that have ever played for Coach, regardless of who it was at Florida or South Carolina or Washington or even back in Duke, have probably heard this. And everybody kind of has their own Spurrier impression. But when you'd make a mistake, you'd be like, Chris, it's not your fault. It's my fault for putting you in there. So it was a really kind of demoralizing statement. He wasn't one to necessarily yell at you a lot, but the sarcasm is kind of how he got to you. But it was an absolute blessing to play for him. And just even now, I'm getting ready to go see Coach tonight. His memory, despite being 80 years old, he can remember every single down and distance and play of the game and on the field. Like, so much fun just to reminisce with Coach. And I really feel blessed to have had a chance to play for him. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder there, but that jersey that Coach signed to me said Chris, one of my favorite players of all times, and that really means a lot to me.
And Chris, if you would tell us what jerseys you have behind you right there for the ones listening on the radio.
Well, I got all the game balls up there from the years, including the Kentucky catch, which is awesome. And then I have Coach Spurrier's that was framed down to my over my right shoulder. The left shoulder is actually that's Dr. J's jersey that I got from a charity auction that I purchased. And then my jersey from my senior year is right behind me. So a nice collection of memorabilia. I think a lot of people come in here and think I'm pretty impressed with myself. But to me, it's just more displaying things that people have shown an interest in wanting to see. So I again, very, very blessed to have done what I've done and thankful to have a few of these keepsakes from over the years.
Well, Chris, we will let you get to your event with Coach Steve Spurier. Really do want to thank you for joining us, and hopefully this season your schedule will permit for you to join the Stingray Show and talk a little SEC football, because it is right around the corner.
Time to crank it up, man. Thanks for having me on, and look forward to checking back in.
And Chris, for you, man, go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right, so guys, that is going to wrap up a wonderful interview there with Gainesville legend Chris Doering, who is also on the SEC Network. Really do want to thank him for joining me.